Stoic practices to heal a weary mind and regain mental strength. Opening. The weight we wake up with every morning. We waken to the same silent battlefield. The world has not yet spoken. The day has not yet unfolded, and yet already our minds feel heavy, not from what has happened, but from what might. The unfinished tasks, the unresolved conflicts, the quiet dread that something will go wrong. We rise, but we do not feel rested. We move, but we do not feel strong. And so the first battle of the day is not fought in the streets, in offices, or in conversations. It is fought in the private space behind our eyes. A war between clarity and chaos, discipline and impulse, reason and fear. We are not alone in this struggle. For centuries, those who sought mastery over themselves wrote of this exact moment, the fragile hour, when the mind is still soft from sleep and vulnerable to despair. One emperor once reminded himself at dawn, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." This was written by Marcus Aurelius, not as poetry, but as a survival tool. We, too, must learn to begin our mornings not passively, but deliberately. Practice 1. Rise. Before the mind begins to wander, there is a moment between sleep and waking where the mind has not yet remembered its worries. This moment is sacred. It is brief, and most of us surrender it without resistance. We reach for distraction. We invite noise. We allow the world to enter before we have even met ourselves. But those who cultivated mental resilience understood something crucial. The first thoughts of the day set the direction of all that follows. So we rise, not in haste, but in awareness. We resist the urge to drift. We sit with ourselves. We breathe, slowly, deeply, reminding the body that it is safe, that it is present, that it is alive. In doing so, we reclaim the morning as ours, not the world's. Practice to confront reality. Before it confronts us, the weary mind suffers most, not from reality, but from surprise. It is not events that break us. It is our refusal to imagine them beforehand. A teacher born into slavery once said, "It is not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them." This was written by Epictetus, and so each morning, we prepare not with anxiety, but with clarity. We remind ourselves, today, we will meet difficult people. We will encounter delays. Plans will collapse. Someone may misunderstand us. None of this is extraordinary. None of it is personal. It is simply life unfolding according to its nature. When we rehearse hardship in the quiet hours, we remove its power to shock us in the loud ones. Practice 3. Separate what we control from what we do not. The exhausted mind wastes its strength trying to command what was never ours to command. We try to control the opinions of others. We try to control outcomes. We try to control the past. And in doing so, we exhaust ourselves before the day has even begun. One Roman statesman wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." These words belong to Seneca. Each morning, we must draw a line. On one side, our actions, our words, our choices, our effort. On the other, everything else. We pour our energy into the first and release the second. Without bitterness, this single act, this daily separation frees enormous mental space. The mind, once tangled in 1,000 invisible threads, becomes still. Practice 4. Voluntarily accept discomfort. A tired mind is often a fragile mind accustomed to ease, shocked by hardship, untrained in endurance. So we introduce small hardships ourselves. We take a cold shower, not for punishment, but for practice. We wake earlier than comfort demands. We sit in silence rather than reaching for stimulation. Because a mind that has tasted voluntary discomfort is not terrified by unavoidable discomfort. We learn that pain is temporary, that hunger passes, that cold fades, that our bodies and minds are capable of far more than they have been asked to endure. Each small act of chosen difficulty whispers a powerful truth. We are stronger than we feel. Practice 5. Anchor the mind in purpose, not mood. The weary mind is easily governed by emotion. If we feel tired, we act tired. If we feel unmotivated, we remain unmoving. But our emotions are not reliable leaders. They shift with sleep, with weather, with the words of strangers. So each morning, we do not ask ourselves how we feel. We ask ourselves, what must be done? The emperor philosopher once wrote in his private journal, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being." Again, these words come from Marcus Aurelius. To him, living meant fulfilling one's role in the world. To us, it means the same. We move not because we are inspired, but because our duty calls us forward. And in moving, despite our mood, we regain authority over our lives. Practice 6. Guard the mind against early corruption. What we consume in the first hour of the day becomes the lens through which we see the rest of it. If we begin with noise, outrage, comparison, and distraction, our thoughts become restless and fragmented. But if we begin with stillness, reflection, and intentional reading, our minds grow sharp and grounded. So we feed the mind carefully. A few pages of wisdom, a moment of reflection, a quiet walk without devices. This is not about isolation. It is about calibration, aligning the mind before exposing it to the chaos of the world. Modern scholars of ancient philosophy often emphasize that these practices were never meant to be abstract theories. They were daily mental exercises, tools meant to be used, not admired. One contemporary writer, Ryan Holiday, has described these practices as training for the soul, reminding us that philosophy was once a form of mental conditioning, not intellectual decoration. We too must train. Practice 7. End the morning with gratitude and perspective. After we have prepared the mind, separated control, accepted discomfort, anchored ourselves in duty, and guarded our attention, we pause. Not to celebrate achievement, but to acknowledge existence itself. We remind ourselves that the day ahead is not guaranteed, that the people we will speak to are not permanent, that even our own breath is temporary. This is not morbid. It is clarifying. When we remember that everything is finite, our frustrations shrink, our patience expands, our appreciation deepens, and suddenly, the weary mind is not healed through comfort, but through perspective. The red thread. From chaos to command, these 7 practices are not isolated rituals. They are steps in a single transformation. We begin the morning scattered, anxious, half awake, and emotionally vulnerable. We rise deliberately. We prepare for adversity. We separate control from illusion. We strengthen ourselves through discomfort. We act according to purpose, not mood. We guard our attention, and we end with gratitude and perspective. By the time the world begins to demand our energy, we are no longer unprepared. We are no longer fragile. We are no longer at the mercy of every passing emotion. We have already won the first battle of the day. Closing. The quiet power of daily discipline. There's no dramatic moment when the weary mind suddenly becomes strong. No single morning where everything changes. Strength is built invisibly, in repetition, in quiet acts no one else sees. The philosophers whose words we still read did not possess supernatural resilience. They trained their minds daily, patiently, often in obscurity, often in hardship. And so, we do the same. We do not wait for life to become easier. We do not wait for motivation to appear. We do not wait for perfect circumstances. We wait, we prepare, we act. And in doing so, day after day, the mind that once felt fragile becomes steady. The thoughts that once raced become ordered. The emotions that once ruled us become voices we can listen to but no longer obey. This is how we heal a weary mind, not with escape, not with distraction, but with discipline, clarity, and the quiet courage to face each morning as it truly is, not a burden, but an opportunity to become stronger than we were yesterday. The hidden cost of an untrained mind. By the time most of us reach adulthood, our bodies have grown stronger, our responsibilities heavier, and our schedules more complex, but our minds remain largely untrained. We have learned how to earn, how to compete, how to present ourselves to the world, yet we have rarely been taught how to endure disappointment, how to quiet intrusive thoughts, or how to carry grief without breaking. And so we live outwardly competent lives while inwardly fragile ones. This fragility is not a personal failing. It is the natural result of a world that teaches us to control everything outside of us, while ignoring the one thing that truly belongs to us: our judgment, our response, our inner world. The philosophers of the ancient world warned about this imbalance. Long before our era of constant stimulation and digital noise, they understood that the greatest threat to our peace would not be war, poverty, or illness, but the unexamined movements of our own minds. One emperor, writing by candlelight, after long days of political conflict and personal loss, reminded himself repeatedly that the mind could be a fortress if only he chose to guard it. That emperor was Marcus Aurelius, and his private writings were never meant to be published. They were instructions to himself, a manual for surviving his own thoughts. We too must become authors of our own mental discipline, not through grand gestures, but through quiet daily corrections, especially in the fragile hours of the morning. Practice 8. Refuse to begin the day as a victim. There is a subtle but destructive habit that weakens the mind before the day has even begun. The habit of waking up and immediately recounting everything that is wrong. We think of the bills waiting to be paid. We replay the argument from yesterday. We dread the tasks that feel too large, too exhausting, too pointless. In doing so, We step into the role of a victim before we have even stood up from bed. The day has not yet harmed us, yet we greet it as though it already has. To reclaim mental strength, we must break this pattern. We must refuse to narrate our lives through the language of helplessness. Instead of saying, "I have to deal with all of this again," we say, "I am being given another chance to respond better than I did yesterday." This shift is not naive optimism. It is disciplined perception. The teacher who once walked the streets of Nicopolis, born into slavery and later freed, insisted that no person could truly harm us unless we allowed them to control our judgments. That teacher was Epictetus, and his life itself was proof that inner freedom could exist even under external chains. Each morning, we are offered a choice: to wake as a victim of circumstances, or as a student of them. Practice 9. Train the mind to endure uncertainty. A weary mind is often a mind addicted to certainty. We crave guarantees, clear outcomes, and predictable futures. When these are absentized, they often spiral into anxiety. We replay scenarios, anticipate worst-case outcomes, and attempt to solve problems that have not yet occurred. In doing so, we exhaust ourselves mentally long before reality demands anything from us. But life has never promised certainty. It has only promised change. The Roman philosopher and statesman Seneca wrote that the person who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than necessary. His warning was not theoretical. He lived in an era of political purges, forced exile, and eventual execution. He understood uncertainty not as an abstract fear, but as a daily companion. So we train ourselves, especially in the morning, to sit with uncertainty without rushing to resolve it. We tell ourselves, "I do not yet know how today will unfold, and that is acceptable." This acceptance is not weakness. It is resilience. A mind that can tolerate the unknown is a mind that cannot be easily shaken. Practice 10. Rehearse adversity without becoming consumed by it. It may seem paradoxical to deliberately imagine hardship in order to feel more at peace. Yet those who studied the patterns of human suffering discovered that the shock of misfortune often hurts more than the misfortune itself. So we rehearse not obsessively, not fearfully, but calmly. We imagine being misunderstood. We imagine losing something valuable. We imagine plans collapsing. And then we imagine ourselves responding with dignity, patience, and composure. This mental rehearsal builds familiarity. The unknown becomes known, and the feared becomes manageable. When adversity eventually arrives, and it always does, we recognize it. It is no longer an intruder but an expected visitor. And because we have already practiced our response, we are less likely to panic, lash out, or collapse into despair. This is not pessimism. It is preparation. Practice 11. Guard against the tyranny of comparison in the modern world. Our minds are constantly exposed to the lives of others, curated, filtered, and often exaggerated. We wake and, within minutes, we are confronted with images of success, beauty, wealth, and happiness that seem to belong to everyone except us. This silent comparison corrodes our mental strength. It convinces us that we are falling behind, that our struggles are unique, that our pace is inadequate. But the ancient thinkers warned us about comparison long before social media existed. They taught that the only life we are equipped to live is our own, and that measuring our worth against others is a recipe for endless dissatisfaction. We must remind ourselves each morning, another person's path is not our standard. Their timeline is not our failure. Their victories do not diminish our progress. When we free ourselves from comparison, we reclaim enormous mental energy that can be redirected toward improving our own character and actions. Practice 12. Speak to yourself as you would to someone you respect. The weary mind is often harsh, critical, and unforgiving toward itself. We speak internally in ways we would never dare speak to a friend or a loved one. We call ourselves lazy. We label ourselves failures. We replay mistakes as evidence of permanent inadequacy. This internal hostility weakens us more than any external criticism ever could. One of the central teachings passed down through generations of philosophers is that we must become both the student and the teacher within our own minds. We must correct ourselves, but with clarity, not cruelty. Each morning, when negative self-talk begins to surface, we pause and ask, would I speak this way to someone I truly respected? If the answer is no, then we must adjust our tone. This is not self-indulgence, it is strategic discipline. A mind that is constantly attacked from within cannot remain strong for long. Practice 13. Build emotional endurance through delayed reaction. One of the most powerful but overlooked forms of mental strength is the ability to delay our reactions. When something irritates us, disappoints us, or provokes us, the instinct is to respond immediately. But immediate reactions are often emotional reactions. And emotional reactions are rarely our wisest ones. So we train ourselves to create space between stimulus and response. In the morning, we rehearse this discipline by recalling past situations where we reacted too quickly. We imagine how differently those moments might have unfolded had we paused, breathed, and allowed reason to catch up with emotion. By practicing this mental pause, we prepare ourselves to carry it into real-life situations later in the day. Over time, this simple habit transforms our relationships, our decisions, and our sense of control. We begin to feel less like passengers in our own lives and more like deliberate participants. The inner citadel, a place no one else can enter among the many metaphors used by ancient thinkers to describe the disciplined mind. One of the most powerful was that of a fortified city, a citadel, that no external force could easily penetrate. This metaphor appears repeatedly in the writings of Marcus Aurelius, who described retreating into his own rational mind as one might retreat into a well-defended fortress. The idea was simple but profound. While we cannot control the storms outside, we can strengthen the walls within. Our morning practices are the daily maintenance of this inner citadel. Each reflection, each act of restraint, each moment of gratitude adds another stone to its walls. Without these daily repairs, the fortress weakens, cracks appear, and eventually, the smallest emotional disturbance can break through and destabilize us. With them, however, we become increasingly difficult to disturb, not because we are numb or indifferent, but because we are anchored. When the mind begins to healing, the mind is not a dramatic event. It does not arrive with a sudden surge of energy or a permanent disappearance of negative thoughts. Instead, it reveals itself through small, almost unnoticeable changes. We begin to react less impulsively. We recover more quickly from disappointment. We feel less threatened by criticism. We find moments of calm in situations that once would have overwhelmed us. These subtle shifts are the true signs of mental strength. They indicate that the practices we repeat each morning are slowly reshaping our instincts. Just as physical training does not transform the body overnight, mental training requires patience and consistency. The mind resists change at first. It clings to familiar patterns of worry, anger, and self-doubt. But if we persist, if we return each morning to these practices with quiet determination, the mind begins to trust us. It learns that we are guiding it, not abandoning it to chaos. End remarks. The long road to mastery. We must accept that there is no final destination in this work. There is no day when we will wake up completely free from intrusive thoughts, negative emotions, or unexpected harm.